Welcome to the Lost Signals Discusses Film and TV. Using the revolutionary Manzur-Ramosi Thurlow scale,
or MONS,
we scrupulously review these art forms with an emphasis on narrative structure. Join us for another entertaining episode.
Hello there, welcome back to Lost Signals Reviews Film and Television. And continuing on our foreign foray, it is now Asian Infusion Month, or a period, if you will. We're doing Asian-influenced and shot and produced films. Tonight's selection is Ip Man. I am your host, not Kung Fu Master Scott Thurlow, here with my friends Jonathan Ian Manzer.
Kung Fu Master in Training.
And Chris Morgan.
I know Kirk Fu.
Good one. And yeah, so Ip Man for the original one, 2008. And I believe E has prepared a logline of some sorts.
I apologize a bit. My Kung Fu is better than your karate.
Yes. That's not bad. It's very broad and encapsulating. So given that, why don't you tell us about the plot, indeed, of Ip Man? Expand upon that logline.
So, Master Ip is an unemployed, in a sense, Kung Fu master, and stress on the master in this town. He's better than everyone else. He, I guess, spends his days fighting off other Kung Fu masters and reoccurring hooligans.
Having the occasional duel.
Yeah. And then the Japanese invade. Hey,
and World War II.
World War II, and gives him purpose in life to actually apply his Kung Fu to making the Japanese surrender in World War II.
So it's somewhat implied.
And there's a lot of Kung Fu.
But no, he basically trains the town to fight back against the Japanese occupiers.
Yeah.
And
wins the honor of the Chinese town versus their Japanese occupiers.
As their cultural honor duels demand.
Yes.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. So given all that, what do you make of it?
Okay, well, I was entertained. It actually reminded me quite a bit of the Western and also the Japanese samurai films with a Chinese film that's promoting Kung Fu Kung Fu master as their hero. And this might be dwelling to themes a little bit, but it was a way for the Chinese to return respect after the horrific and really horrific events that the Japanese did in their invasion during World War II. And it is where they're kind of something that they can grasp.
It's kind of like a rallying sort of thing.
A rally to beat the Japanese back and retain their honor. And for that, I respect it a lot. I didn't know I didn't know much about this movie aside from it was supposedly a great flick going in. It really struck me when they did the Japanese invasion.
Yeah, and, I mean, it takes a harsh turn there for sure.
And it kind of, you mentioned this while we're watching it, it's sort of Rocky-ish or Rocky 4-ish.
At least the final battle can feel like that sort. But because you said it's in somewhat of that vein.
Yeah. I'm either going to give it a strong 2 or a solid 3, depending if anyone can convince me one way or the other.
You got Chris?
I have to say, it did start off like your classic Kung Fu movie that you'd see on like a Saturday afternoon. But like you said, then boom, all of a sudden we're in World War II. The Japanese have occupied the place, and it changes tone. I mean, to the point where, like,
for sure.
We'll get to it when we get to style, how the film was treated, the film was shot. This is a difficult one because I'm leaning towards it too narratively, because some of it did get a little tedious, but it was like no real fault. I mean, it might have been. It's probably by design. I have to say I'm really impressed that I figured the fights are all going to go on twice as long as they did, believe it or not. There was a great amount of story in this. I don't know. I'm definitely leaning towards a 2, but I could probably be convinced to a 3 the more I think about it.
Because in a way, the reoccurring hooligan was, I understand, like, adding an aspect to the invasion and the fact that some Chinese were preying upon Chinese during that event, and that it gave the impetus for him to train the town. But that was it. It's a short movie. It did feel tedious at times. I don't know. I understand what it's trying to do, and it did it well, but I don't know if that's a narrative.
Yeah, the reoccurring hooligan, the master hooligan of the reoccurring hooligans.
Yeah.
He was the one who like basically beat all the masters up in town, and then could not defeat the Ip Man. So he comes back during an occupation, and everybody's weaker, but he's always had the upper hand. He's become overconfident, and I liked when that Ip Man taught the factory workers kung fu, and I like the fact that the factory workers still got their asses kicked. Like it wasn't like some kind of like I know it was based on a true story, but still, there is always some glamorization, and I like the reoccurring hooligan who now came back and once again thought he was the king of the hill, and then after he was defeated, he's still bitter at Ip Man because he stopped him from opening a school. School. So I mean, he did the reoccurring hooligan did
But narratively, what purpose did he serve aside from
just testing our protagonist?
Yeah.
I don't know. I was trying to talk my way through that. I was kind of hoping.
I'm gonna argue for a 3 because, like you said, yeah, it's short enough. It's under 2 hours, so like it's consumable in that sense, and like nowadays it's something I sort of take into account. But even beyond that, I think it was a pretty tight narrative in my view. So like, yeah, I see your point about like just that like specific subplot thread, but that's something you've seen in many other movies like it, and I think it was handled better here than other ones. Like you sort of did just argue like, okay, if that was cut out of the film, what would have changed? Maybe not all that much, but I still think it has a reason to be there and serves its purpose, even if you guys felt might have like been either a little bit longer. You used the word tedious. I did not think that ever during this film.
Well, the funny thing...
You might say it's superfluous as a plot point or something, but I think it was a really strong, like, nice 3 arcs, like, very clear cut, and none of them were dragged on or were too short, in my view. So that's my argument for 3. I think it was a very strong plot. They tied up all the threads. It all made sense.
That's my problem, and I'm picking on this one point because I think it's the weakest point in this. That they introduced this character twice. If they introduced him once as an establishment of the power of Ip, that'd be fine. They introduced him again for, I feel, no reason. And if he returned at a point for a narrative sense, that would have added to it. But it just seems now the second appearance served no particular purpose to me in watching the film. So I might give it a strong 2 overall, but not necessarily a 3.
Like, I get you. I guess I'll just rebut that one point, because one of you said it, I think Chris said that yourself, like, he was sort of the impetus for Ip Man training, like, the rest, like, the survivors of the town. So, like, you're saying it served no purpose, but it served that purpose. It's like, yeah, maybe it could have been something else. Could have been just the Japanese army, like, would have, like, filled that role, or, like, someone from it. Maybe, but, like, I'm just saying, like, that's what the purpose of him coming back was. Well, so in that sense, I still think it was fairly tight.
I want to hear your thought.
Well, I was going to say, because that was the point I was wondering if they could have jettisoned or not. But then all of a sudden they start talking about, especially at the end, about how he united through his martial art. And part of uniting people was the factory worker. That Scott's right that the reoccurring hooligan did come back, but it gave them a reason to unify the factory workers, and thereby it kind of set up the ending where he unified the town behind him.
That's kind of what I'm saying.
Kind of taught the town to fight back. I know, Scott, you just gave the part I was questioning a purpose. So I'm now leaning towards 3.
Yeah, I suppose I'll give it a 3 because
that's my final thought on it. And if it's say 2 or 3, like, cool. But I could see like the 2s would have been fine.
No, but that was a good observation. All
right. Well, very nice. So let's move on to themes, and that'll be you, Chris.
Ooh, Death Before Dishonor.
I thought one of you might say that as a log-on, actually, because yes, it's very clearly there because of the nature of the cultures involved. And sure, go on.
Yes. So I mean, there is a whole honor thing, but there is also kind of a unity thing where at the beginning he was kind of like the hot shot there, and his wife and his son were becoming estranged.
But sort of. But hold on, like he wasn't. He was like reluctantly the hotshot. You mean it's not like he was like the one?
Well, he was also holding himself back.
Yes,
sure.
Because he realized that he had to put his family first, even though he wanted to go out and play. Sure. He knew that his first responsibility was his family.
Go on.
So it's kind of like he unified the family. He lost his friends, but he was able to start unifying more. So unity. This one's a difficult one, to be honest with you.
Not particularly, because I already mentioned the theme of what this was trying to do. It was giving a sense of honor back to the Japanese invasion, which I think did very well. Now, I mentioned this precast, and I don't think it's a one-to-one comparison, but there is something to say that things like, what was the Steven Spielberg film?
Schindler's List.
Schindler's List, yes. I can't remember. Oh, the idea of, like, these atrocities happened, let us reestablish, like, honor there. And I think it actually did it very well. If it came across a little bit propaganda-y, I think in the sense it was you can't escape that.
That's what I was going to say. Like, yeah, like it was a noble intent. I don't think like it was handled poorly. For sure, that was there. Like they're drawing a clear parallel between that, and like that's a lot of the intent going into it, and that's perfectly fine because I think it came off well. But yeah, like it's obviously there.
Yeah.
But if it was handled poorly, I think we would tell you that, like say that. But I think it was like deftly inserted.
I don't think saccharine at the time. I mean, it was like.
Yeah, no, I know what you mean.
Nationalist at times, but I don't think it was
not overly so and
distracting.
Exactly.
Actually, as watching American films of this type,
it actually was a little bit more reserved.
I think it is fair to call them, nationalist propaganda films because I mean, look at Rocky IV as a nationalist propaganda film.
For sure.
Red Dawn was a nationalist propaganda film, even though that actually had a darker ending. No, I mean, the thing is, actually, I'm pointing out two movies where there's actually a cost that's paid. But if you look at a lot of American Independence Day, something like that, it's just like we are definitely more over the top when it comes to shit like this.
Favorite, for sure. Sorry, I was going to say.
No, come
nonetheless, I think that this movie handled it very well. They also kind of, again, I'm embarrassingly not knowledgeable of the Japanese invasion of China.
Admittedly, we're not as familiar with that history because that's not what we're taught.
Yeah, either in history class or on the History Channel, it's rarely ever discussed. Yeah. And I think,
but it did happen, and for sure.
And from what I understand, it was absolutely brutal. And this movie really, I think, even not knowing what, like just having a vague sense of what happened, I felt really, they made it like
clear.
I was rooting for the Chinese, which is theoretically a rival of the United States in this day and age, but like the idea is like this moves past that.
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
It makes me excited for like China and rooting for them, and even the one character they had is the traitor, which was discussed later, or the interpreter. He even has a redemptive point to it.
Yeah,
and from what I understand about Chinese culture, it does strike a couple of chords there, such as duty to the group versus the individual, the idea of what a relationship should be like with the family relationship. I thought all of it like worked really well and gave me a kind of a more interest in looking up Chinese history, especially that period.
Yeah, I mean, I genuinely agree. I'm not going to add much more, but it was nicely handled throughout. And yes, while it might not be as like familiar, at least to audiences like us, it certainly was an aspect of it. And it again, while it balanced that line between being obviously that, but without being over the top and in your face about it every single second of the film. So I think it like had a nice melding, like subtly woven throughout, but it never like, at least in Act 2 and onwards, it never let you forget that. But it also didn't make it distracting, as you said. So I give it credit for balancing it in that way.
And you said something that I thought was interesting. I don't know if it's not about the narrative of the film, but you said, you were rooting for the Chinese, even though technically now they're our rivals. No, but the thing is, yes, the Japanese, we're telling a point in history, and we're definitely telling it from the Chinese point of view. But it also comes back to me that like there was a Japanese actor playing the general. Mm-hmm. What I'm saying is just in a meta way, this is a really good example of showing, well, people are people and governments are governments. Mm-hmm. You can't condemn, an entire people because they're, what their government is.
I was going to get off on this when we're talking antagonist, but since you brought it up, I like the fact that the general wasn't necessarily a bad guy. He was more interested in honor.
He had honor himself for sure.
Karate than or martial arts, I should say, versus necessarily was the best interest, but they did have a member that is dragon of sorts.
Yes,
Sato
that's how I have him written down.
was a monster in a lot of ways of just being efficient, murdering people when he thought they were dishonoring. But again, it wasn't necessarily portraying the Japanese as just blanket
as monsters, like
Yeah.
every single second. Sure. Now you're right about that, which is interesting because it brings me. So we're giving themes of one.
Yeah.
It brings me to antagonists, and like you sort of like kicked it off there. Like, yeah, of course it's shown. Like, again, Act 1 is Master Ip just doing his thing, and in the peaceful town until the war comes to it, and then he sort of, at first he just works in like the mines essentially, right? Like hard labored, like he's still getting paid in food at least to keep his family alive, and then the General Miro comes in, and sort of like honorably, like sets up, we'll have Japanese fighters versus Chinese fighters duels, and if you win, I'll give you a sack of rice. Like, right? He's fair about it, although like maybe a little harsh, but still he's not like. He's not rigging the tournament in any way.
Well, I mean, he even said that, like, win or lose, give him a bag of rice.
Right. So it was the enticement to fight.
Because it would have been, as you said, it would have been very easy to push it over to where they're all like these one-dimensional black hats.
He wanted to prove Japanese martial arts are better than Chinese in an honorable way, if you will. Again. So anyway, and then Sato is sort of just his like monster dragon, if you will, who's just like brutally beating everybody every chance he can get. And even he gets chewed out or called out at least by the general here and there. So yeah, I think like the Japanese forces, of course, like as a whole, but as personified by the general and by Sato, I think the actors did a really good job of like straddling the line without like, at least the general, like we said, not being a complete monster all the time. And in fact, you can sympathize with him or at least see where he's coming from and see why he's doing what he's doing, even if he is overseeing atrocities.
But even if it wasn't for Sato,
commanding.
I think everything would have worked out in the favor because he wouldn't have murdered the other martial artist that was friends with Master Ip. But I don't know. Like I'm not going to say that it's Goth-like from Schindler's List because that's a very complex villain.
True,
but it was more complex than I would it's more complex than Rocky IV.
Exactly. He in no way is one-dimensional, mustache twirling, or anything like that. So yeah. And I think, yes, of course, like because of the times in which they're portraying it and the culture in which it's set in, then that comes into play. But even so, I think it was a very well done portrayal of an antagonist that, again, viewed to the themes we just said it was.
I mean, there could have been a lot of B-roll of like the atrocities happening outside of town. They kept it focused on this town.
Yeah, for sure. They didn't they weren't like grotesque about it, but they were still letting you know like what was happening.
Yeah.
Or heavily implied.
You saw horrible things like some guy being shot in the street for no reason or whatever. But by the same token, it's just like, I know some of what happened because, my family are really, my grandfather was in World War II, but, it's just like they were reserved in it. They kept the film focused.
Yeah, it wasn't gratuitous, but still.
It's very easy to depict your villains as monsters. It's, I think, difficult to depict your villains as honorable as well.
For sure.
So, and it did that. So I'm going to give it a 1.
I agree.
Yep.
All right. Brings us to Pro Tag with you, E.
All right. So I'm probably going to give this a 0 for a particular reason.
All right.
I like Master Ip. I understand his role as a superhero in this, but the man is a Gary Stu.
I kind of knew you were going to say that.
Everything he does, his only flaw in this is that he has people he cares about around him. There was never a moment in this that I worried that he was going to lose, that he dominates every single situation, even the final battle. Yeah, he gets hit a couple of times, which you've never seen in any of his fights beforehand.
Sure.
But never did I, at one moment, think that he wasn't in control of the situation.
Like, I get it. It's sort of the nature of a film like this or a story like this anyways. But
he was more Superman, less Batman.
Absolutely.
I guess, but like, it's tough because I'm leaning towards giving him a 1, but I see your points for sure. The thing is, like I said, it's always going to be the case. Like, Rocky is going to be Rocky. Like, Master Ip is going to be Mr.
Rocky had more flaws than...
Yeah, and Rocky always has
I'm not
that
trying to make a direct comparison. I'm just saying, like, it's a
roughly
like a character like that. So I think, like, he wasn't, like, sure, he wasn't the actually most charming or interesting character, but he was good enough. Like, he certainly was a protagonist. We can't argue that, right? So I think he did a good enough job with it. I think the actors were good. Donnie Yen was solid. You're saying story-wise?
narratively, he
because
was
of that.
I loved watching him fight.
Invincible.
It's like watching a great dancer, but it just if they went too overboard in anything in this, it was with making him just an impenetrable superhero.
That's a tough point because that's true. It's almost like too much of the hero's journey. Like he's already badass.
But I kind of see Ian's point because, like, even when he found out his friend was shot, I mean, it was lacking some kind of. You felt for him. It's kind of like emotionally.
It's harsh, man.
It's like emotionally with regard to his motives and how he reacted to his friends. It was more stoic than I don't know.
So let me just make a point to this. His friend, the other master, dies after having to fight 3 guys and
requesting to fight 3 guys because he thought he could do it,
and giving up. The guy dies, and Master Ip comes in saying, "I'm going to fight 10," and never did for a moment did I think that he would lose to 10 people. One. Like that's a flaw narratively. I mean, I can't go past that point.
I think you're swaying me. Like, you're making a good point because, like, it's the narrative thing versus, like, the actual character, right? To a degree. Like you said, he wasn't a bad actor. He actually was quite good, and, like, he served his role. But because because there were almost no stakes, is what you're saying. Like, there was never going to be any stakes, regardless. Like, it was almost a predetermined conclusion that he's going to even win the final battle.
Well, that's kind of like that's you guys are helping me fill out what I said before. That stoicism. It even came through, like, I didn't really get a lot of emotion from it. It kind of felt like he was telling me more than showing me because he was really, stoic the whole time. I mean, yeah, he got to put up a front, but, I mean, and you saw that he was focused, yeah. But I don't know, I felt some kind of emotional disconnect with the character is what is my feeling, my interpretation of maybe what you're saying.
Yeah, so did his wife, so that's fair.
The mark against it. No, yeah, it's funny. I just turned my 1 into a 0 because of that. Like, again, because of that angle specifically, which I think is a valid way to look at it. And you've swayed me towards it. Yeah. Right, Chris, you too?
Yeah, I'm giving it a 0.
All right, well, keep on talking then. You can talk about the secondary characters, buddy.
All right, the secondary characters, I have to say, if no other reason, the reoccurring hooligan, it was like awesome.
I mean, but there are like a lot of good ones.
No. What I'm saying is there's a lot of good ones, but I really enjoyed his character a lot because he did have the bravado, but he had the emotion, he had the frustration. He was Japanese are occupying China, and he's still holding a grudge against Ip Man. I mean, he's
trying to survive.
But the thing is, he had a lot of the pathos that I felt that Ip Man was lacking.
That's really funny.
His friend, who saw him hide the yam so he could take it home to his family, shared his yam with them. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's like I loved that his friend, that character, because there's that compassion.
I believe that's Lynn.
Lynn. Is that Lynn?
Okay. His younger student who he works with in the
who's a restaurant owner.
Yes.
And then coal miner.
Yeah. I mean, I really liked that character a lot. I liked his younger brother, even though he was a little bit of a dick. I mean, he was a natural younger brother who's rebellious. And at the end, when he gets the box that his brother left him with the kite, that was a really emotional scene for me. Mm-hmm. And I also did like General Miura. Again, for all the reasons we said, that even the actor did not play him.
Well, he's the antagonist, but I get what you mean.
Yeah, but no, what I'm saying is, yeah, that's true. He is the antagonist, but.
Well, I want to throw in my favorite character in this, whose name unfortunately escapes me, but the interpreter /
I believe
trader,
it is Quan.
Yeah.
He is perhaps the most complex character in this movie.
I agree.
The fact that he becomes he's a
well, you've seen that kind of character before when like
Chinese man who becomes becomes an interpreter for the Japanese, and he's well dressed because he has a much better situation than all the other his fellow people, and then you find out that he's feeding a large family, including people who are like very hurt and can't feed themselves, and it's such a great
facets. It subverts something.
The more you see this character, the more you start you have this initial impression of him as this trader, and everyone else does, until you see his real life situation and the fact that the sacrifices he's willing to make for Mr. Ip, and even to his own detriment. And I really respect that. He's such a great character.
Because people like that, you're like, it's like they see you working for the enemy, and you are by association the enemy. It doesn't really matter, and I agree with you on everything you said. I think he's definitely the most complex character. I think he definitely probably had the most sustained emotional arc. And so
and he ends up killing Sato, who was perhaps the worst character. Yeah, not necessarily worst in the sense of...
He's the most vicious character against him. Yeah. For sure. And I think Quan is a good choice. Certainly, I agree with everything you said, but I'll just give a shout out to some other ones. Chang is Master Ip's wife. I thought she did a fine job. Yeah, she wasn't in it actually all that much, even though, given that her character role as his wife. But I think she was strong enough when she was on screen. And his son, Zhang, was fine too. There are a couple others, he called them, I believe is also not Zhang, but not Zhan, but Zhang is Uncle Businessman, as we call them. Right. It's sort of the guy he knows in town who knows how to run a business, and that's it. He's one of the first ones who actually gets assaulted by a hooligan, Master Hooligan, which I forgot. I didn't have his name written down, so I apologize. But yeah, so they all filled out the world for sure, right? And he had the relationship with each of them. But I agree that Quan had the biggest, amongst secondary characters, the best and most interesting arc, and sort of subverted what you thought was going to happen. Even though you've seen that character, the one guy in town who sells out officer services to the occupying forces.
He's not,
but he's doing it, to still help his fellow countrymen.
So to make it, the Mummy with Benny is the same kind of. They easily could have played that character very similar to that, but it wasn't. He was.
Yeah, for sure. It was humanized.
Yes.
No, I agree, and I'm giving secondary a 1. I believe you gentlemen are as well. So that'll bring me to dialogue. This one's a bit tough because, in full disclosure, we watched the first half hour of this film with English dubs on it, and it was it was fine. It wasn't terrible or anything.
It was terrible,
but it was noticeably worse when then we switched over. We decided okay, let's put on the original because that's what we're doing for the foreign films previous to this. So yeah, it was almost anime style for that. So it was over the top, but it didn't quite gel. But once you heard it in its natural language and then could see the interpretation, that I think changed the tone a bit. But the issue I'm having is I wrote down 0 for dialogue is because while everything that was said was necessary and believable to advance the plot, it wasn't all that. I don't want to even I want to say poetic there, but it was the most bare bones would need to be. Now the issue is that because of its subtitle nature of interpretation, is there more nuance to it? Have we been native speakers of the language? So that's kind of the issue I'm debating with on this one.
So what's really funny is I think I've seen kung fu parodies with the same dialogue in it. That there are moments of it that are laughable, both on the sense of my kung fu is better than your kung fu, and also on the Chinese propaganda angle. Now, so that's what stuck with me over the course of watching this movie, and not maybe some better dialogue that was in there. But what's left with me is the things I laughed at.
What's actually left with me was going back to the interpreter. The fact that he would kind of embellish, or in other words, he was kind of controlling the situation because Ip Man would say something over the top.
Sure, insulting
I'm gonna
or
fuck you.
dangerous.
He's just
he says he'll be back later or whatever.
Yeah, it's I'm going to fucking kill him. He'll be back later. I mean, but what I'm saying is, I don't know if that quite goes into dialogue, but to me, dialogue, but to me, dialogue-wise, that's what I remember. Exchanges like that, where yes, if we were to gauge it on the first third of the film, which is basically, we'll get to a style, I would agree with you because that dialogue was basically parodying itself in earnest. But once the Japanese took over, I think everybody else's dialogue around Ip Man, I thought was pretty solid.
I absolutely loved translation humor, and they did it very well in this.
Yeah.
You're absolutely right.
So does that mean you're giving it a 1?
I might.
It's tough because, that is true. But I'm just saying, taken at face value, it's not bad dialogue. Do not get me wrong, by any means. However, it's what it needs to necessarily be. Like, it couldn't be anything else to keep the plot going along. So there's some fine interactions, yeah, but it is for the most part like, we are not going to have a duel for the honor of China. Like, and it sounds like a parody when I say it like that, but like they mean it in earnest, and it comes off fine, perfectly fine as such. It just means it's not all that standout to me.
I'm now really torn about this because you're right. That is,
you know what I mean.
You had to remind me of that,
and that happened more than a couple of times. Like the conversations like that, their interaction, and so forth.
No, that was an extension of the beginning.
That is the that is the translation of it, but that's what it comes off as.
The extension of the beginning is, I suppose, the middle and perhaps the end. So I might have to go with a strong 0, whatever that means.
Yeah, no, I get you. I'm just saying, like, that's my argument for 0. And like, yes, I like this movie a lot, but one of the weaker points of it to me was that.
Okay, I agree with you.
I mean, you don't have to, but that's my argument.
No, because the parts I remember, I really liked. But you're right. When you came to Ip Man, and once you got to the ring, it became the same dialogue you saw at the beginning, which is very
right. And it can feel satirical at times because it's so like cut and dry.
It at times remind me of Kung Fu Hustle and movies like that.
right, exactly. All right, so let's move on to style, and that'll be Yui, a good one actually.
So I wish Rich were here right now because amongst our reviewers, he's the most knowledgeable about
and appreciates, I think,
good Kung Fu. Yeah. So I was actually trying to pay attention because the amount of cuts really signifies from what I understand about it, what good Kung Fu is or not.
Yeah.
There were a lot of cuts in this, but there were moments that they extended to show their skills. So overall, I think that I enjoyed it much more so than the Marvel Iron Fist.
Well, of course, I knew one of you were going to mention that.
I enjoyed my root canal more than Iron Fist.
Yeah,
it was shorter, and I was on drugs. So.
Well, no, I enjoyed the action scenes in this. I thought they were quite clever. They varied styles quite a bit between fighting with fists versus fighting with weapons, and I don't know enough to really discuss it, unfortunately, but like overall, I felt that in a sense when them looking at the effects of the war, it was a good mixture of like a kung fu movie and a reflection about a war.
Yeah,
and so I'm going to overall give it, and so genre-wise, I think they captured exactly what they wanted to.
No, I mostly agree. So I'll say this: since this is a kung fu movie, I've been sort of studying under Rich Perry. About like viewing and how to analyze good choreography, specifically in fight scenes in like martial arts movies, and so given that, I think it would look really, really good. I think they knew what they were doing. Like, yes, there were I don't think there were like that many like cuts per se. There were a few for the most part.
The last battle particularly had a lot of cuts in it.
But like before that, I thought it wasn't like they were trying to hide anything. I think. Again, they showed it quite nicely, and they even set up a lot of the moves and varied it as you said, like throughout. So like I've seen Master Ape do that move before, but now it's comboed to something else, like more, et cetera, et cetera. And yeah, and beyond that, beyond just the fight scenes, as you mentioned, the cinematography itself was quite excellent. Like go ahead.
No,
I could go on, but you go.
No, because I was gonna say, relating to the cinematography, I loved the style of this movie because the story could be told just through color. The way everything was very vivid, the way it was shot at the beginning reminded me of more like a 1940s, 1950s movie where that's kind of fluffy. Just the shots of it kind of had this weird grain, the way the color was. But as soon as the Japanese invaded, it became gray. It became the film was shot differently, even though in the kung fu. The kung fu, the martial arts scenes did have a lot of cuts like they do in the beginning, but they were more stylized to the tone of the film there. I didn't mean to cut you off before, but I needed to jump on the cinematography
That's
thing.
Perfect, because that's also a thing I was going to bring up too. Like, when a tone changes, the way it's shot somewhat changes to match that, and that was pretty excellent.
I also want to point out that I really appreciated the fact that his early style was very defensive, because he didn't want to harm anyone.
Yep,
and then when he lets loose, it becomes more very exciting.
Oh yeah,
and for sure, you can see the evolution of that, and it was a very nice touch. Good call. All right, one's all around on style, and we have come to recommendation. Chris, do you recommend Ip Man?
I absolutely recommend Ip Man, but please, please, please put the subtitles on and play it in the original Cantonese.
Do it correctly.
Because it really... okay, I think we changed it at the right time because at the beginning where it was kind of fluff, we had the bad...
It felt a little like anime, like it was a little over the top, and we couldn't take it as seriously.
I think we kind of did our own thing because at the beginning it was kind of like those Saturday afternoon kung fu movies, and so with the bad dubbing, so we had the bad dubbing.
It was a little DBZ-ish, and that was not appropriate for this film.
Yeah, but as soon as we got to the Japanese thing, the Japanese occupation, I think Ian said, let's listen to it in the original Cantonese.
Yeah.
And it just became...
No, what happened was the Japanese started speaking more often, and we weren't
and there was
getting,
no subtitles for that.
Okay.
They were speaking Japanese, so we decided to switch over, and I noticed that they had an option for Cantonese.
Yeah.
It's on Netflix, by the way.
Yeah, check it out.
It's easily available, by the way, as well.
But I definitely recommend it. I think it's great.
All right. Do you?
I think that Americans in general should be more aware of China in World War II, and I think that this does it very well and gives a very sympathetic look at the Japanese, and so I fully recommend it.
I mean, I agree. Yes, it can be an important historical look at a period in history that we might not be as exposed to and not know as much about, and also it's a cool action movie, so you kind of get the best of both worlds in terms of that. And you can educate yourself while watching some cool kung fu duels, and it's really well done. It's from 2008, so again, not too long ago. I think it holds up damn nicely, even for that. And like you said, expose yourself to different cultures here and there, which is what we're trying to do to ourselves and to you.
I absolutely agree with you, Chris, that I particularly like to hear it in its original language with subtitles.
And
I know some people
it does add a lot, though.
But the subtitles didn't match I wouldn't say seriousness, but the tone of the movie. Mm-hmm. And I think that it's better to listen to it for that reason.
Nope, I pretty much agree. So it's a nice touch if you are going to do it. And I will give it the scores. It's very nice. It breaks down to 8, 8, and 8 from each of us, an average of an 8, which I think is damn solid. And we also took points for the exact same reasons. We convinced ourselves of the various questions that we took points off of. And yeah, man, Ip Man, fucking solid. Like we said, check it out. It's easily available, and it's a worthwhile film for sure. All right, any final thoughts? Any final kung fu moves? All right, my friends. Well, I've been Scott Thurlow, and I've been here with Jonathan Ian Manzer.
True American action hero.
Mm-hmm. And Chris Morgan.
Everybody's kung fu fighting.
And Wang Chung later.
Editing and engineering by Christopher Morgan. Music by Christopher Morgan. Check us out on YouTube and iTunes for the shows, and on Facebook and Twitter for updates. Or mods?